All right, welcome into today's show, joined by Phil Breeden with LC Barbecue. He's out of Bandera, Texas, which is about an hour from San Antonio. Phil, thanks for joining us.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks, Kurt. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. So Phil is fresh off the American Royal last weekend, as I'm sure a lot of teams are. So we're definitely going to dive in that here today. But as we always do, we always start with journey. It's a fascinating thing for me, and I think our listeners as well. But educate us, Phil. So when did this barbecue journey start for you?
So for me, it started in 2014, really it started. And I did my first competition in 2015, January of 2015. 2014, I'd been out at the deer lease in the fall, cooking a lot. You know, we got 20, 25 people there. So offset smoker, we're always cooking something. And I enjoy cooking and feeding people. And a buddy that was hanging out with me goes, "Man, this is delicious. You should do a competition." And I said, "What is that?" And he goes, "Oh, they have barbecue competitions." I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, there's one in January. I'll get the info." I said, "Okay, sounds cool." And that's kind of how I got started. I went and did that cook-off a few months later. That was my first one. There was 19 teams. Yeah, and I didn't really know what to expect. A lot of unknowns. It was fresh to me as far as the competition world. We got boxes and tickets to keep up with. And man, I'm like, soaking all this in, trying to figure it out. Chicken, ribs, and brisket was that comp. And they only called, it was a Go Texan event. They only called the top three. And, we went to awards, had a great cook. Obviously, the best barbecue that God has ever created on this earth was made that day by us. So we're high hopes. And they start calling chicken third, second. I get the first, not me. But then they moved on to ribs and they did third and second, and first was not me. And, we got brisket to go. And I'm like, man, I don't know about this whole competition gig. I think they got it wrong. And maybe we should go fishing next week. And man, they called third and second. They got the first brisket and it was me. So that probably changed the course of the past 8 or 9 years for me, hitting first place brisket at that first comp. The hook was set and man, I was both feet in right out of the gates, just eating up with it. So I started off doing about a dozen comps a year, roughly 2015, 2016, 2017. And I did well, several grands, several reserves, a lot of success. And in 2018, in January, I went and cooked Hold'em and hit 'em. It's a cook-off near Houston. And I did real well there. I went the next weekend, I don't remember where. And I went the next weekend, I don't remember where. Well, lo and behold, I ended up cooking 50 cook-offs in 2018. So I guess 2018 is when it got super serious to where, man, I was just cooking all the time. And man, that's all I really wanted to do is just cook. And, I had created this chicken injection from when I started. I don't really, a couple of years before then. And that's what I was using for my chicken injection and doing really well, man. I forget how many first place I had, but it was a ton. So the thoughts in 2018 were, man, I wonder if I can put this in a package and sell it. And at the time, I had no clue how to do that. And I reached out to some friends in the barbecue world. Dennis Butterworth was very helpful in that. And got hooked up with the right people and figured out how to put that product in a package and sell it. And that product was Foul Play. And that was our first product that LC Barbecue released in 2018. It was in July of 2018. So LC Barbecue was born then.
And so transition now, or fast forward from 2018 to 4 years later, we find you with not only a chicken injection, but you've got a complete offering of rubs and injections, the whole 9 yards, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, after Foul Play was such a huge success, it immediately made it harder for me to win first place chicken because, man, 75% of the field was using it. So
right.
The weapon was out, which was great. I mean, and it's awesome to see other people win with your products. It's a proud feeling anytime somebody has enough confidence in our world to use your products with the thousands of products that are out there. So the mindset after that was, naturally, and it wasn't immediate. It was later in, probably 3 or 4 months later, I'm like, well, what's next? Well, you better get to work and develop more products if you want a full line of products.
Right.
and I went to work on a brisket injection, and we released our second product as Playbull, followed by like 6 months later, Boss Hog, our pork injection. Fast forward, I think the next one I came out with another year later was Angry Bull, another brisket injection. And man, I probably get that question more than anything, is what's the difference between your two brisket injections? When I was developing Play Bull, man, I was on the fence between those two. They were so good, but they were different. And I ended up releasing Angry Bull, and I cooked it for all of 2018, 19 maybe. I don't remember. I used it for a year, and I think I was second overall in IBCA that year. No, I told you wrong. Play Bull was the first brisket I released. And I knew I had that other one. So fast forward later, and I'm like, man, that one's great too. So I ended up releasing Angry Bull. And the difference between the two, Play Bull actually has more going on. I recommend Play Bull for prime briskets or choice, or something that you really need to bring home and kind of help that brisket out. And Angry Bull is more of a compliment, that I suggest using with Wagyu, that doesn't need as much help. You're just trying to accent, to me, round the corners and not really throw it in their face. So you got two avenues with brisket injections, was the thought process there, and the explanation between the two. Then we followed that up with Hen Drench, which is our brine, chicken brine, or poultry, what have you. Works great on turkey too.
Yeah.
I kind of ran it at the Royal this year, and every other year that I've cooked it. So after that, Rawhide was the next product. So the mindset was, man, I feel pretty good with what we got going on injection wise. Let's get into the rub world, which to me is not as exciting, just because, man, it's almost overly saturated. But man, there's millions of combinations of how you can do blends, so there'll never be an end to it. But I did want a full line of products, so I thought I would start out with an all-purpose, which became Rawhide. And I really underestimated how successful that product is, or how important it is. It's a base layer on everything I cook. So it's the base. It's the platform that gets my meats off the ground, and makes them do what they do. And at the house, man, we use that in everything we cook, damn near. So. Followed by Certified, which is our chicken and pork rub. And then in 20, my COVID creation was Last Call, which we like on beef and chicken. It's really great on steaks. Rawhide Last Call makes a great steak. And then, this summer, I released Butthurt, which is our second pork injection. And again, similar along the lines of our brisket injections, are having two options. Man, how cooks are. They're always looking for the next best thing. And that doesn't mean it can't be within the same product line. If they're not using Boss Hog, man, I hope they're using Butthurt, right? I've got two great options for these cooks that maybe work with their program. And I've had a lot of success with Butthurt this year. So I think I rounded out all 9 products, I think.
Sure.
And man, I've got 4 or 5 products that I've been working on. I just don't get them. I just don't get them released fast.
I love that.
They're never released until I'm satisfied.
That's right. Which I'm sure is hard to do. Like you said, a lot of cooks are always looking for the next best thing, the shiny bells and whistles. And it can be hard sometimes to focus, but clearly you found a way to focus. I mean, you talked about 2014, where, you were just cooking in the backyard. Somebody said, hey, let's go compete. You did, you got bit by the bug, the competition bug, so to speak. And then fast forward, 8 years, it's not only are you competing at a high level, but you're also offering full lines of, rubs and injections. And while we're on the topic, where can listeners buy this stuff? What's your website? What's your website address?
Yeah, our website is lcbbqshop.com. We ship daily. We ship all over the world. So that's a great avenue for people that wanted to come straight to their front door. And we're also in about 40, 45 retailers nationwide. Your major barbecue retailers, specifically, most of them. And if you guys have somewhere you buy from and we're not in your store, man, ask your folks to reach out to us. We would love to be in there. So that's typically how we've gotten into all the stores that we're in, is by, a cook going, hey, do you have this? And then the more you ask, they'll reach out to us, and we're happy to get into those stores, to expand and grow the footprint.
That's exactly right. So tell us about LC Barbecue. What does the LC stand for?
Yeah, so I guess I skipped that part. Way back, fast forward back to 2015 and that first cook-off. Well, and that's how much I knew about cook-offs. My buddies were like, hey, you got to have a team name. And I'm like, okay, like Phil Breeden? Like, no, man, it's got to be a cool name and something about barbecue. I don't know. And I'm like, man, you got any idea? Well, when we were cooking at the deer camp, me and my buddy Rob Rogers, shit, we were cooking one day, and I don't remember what we were cooking, but one of the guys brought up a bunch of ribs, and so I was going to cook these ribs, and he already had them seasoned and everything. And then he goes, but man, why don't y'all do it? Because we have been cooking a lot and everything really turned out. He goes, yeah, no problem. So we got the ribs and we took them into the camp, and we rinsed them off and start over. And we were digging through the cabinets looking for something to see, because we weren't really prepared to do that day. And
Sure.
Man, we found 3 or 4 shakers, and we're oh yeah, this will work. Man, this is a pretty good one. This will make this come out. And it was a little shaker, and it was some oil filled rub that had, apparently some company had got some spice company to put them together, some, I guess, promotional stuff to give out to their, and I have no idea, but it was called Panther. It was Panther Construction or something. And this Panther going across the label. And so when we cooked those ribs, and it was the best thing anybody had ever ate. They're, oh man, what y'all use on this game? We got just Panther. And they were like, okay, I don't know what that is. So we kind of joked about it. Well, that's the name that we ended up calling ourselves Just Panther, that first cook-off, which is probably the worst name ever. It was really funny if you knew the background. It was really stupid if you didn't. So the next cook-off, man, a lot of my buddies call me the Leprechaun or whatever. I don't know why, but they do. And they said, man, it should be Lucky Charms. I'm like, man, I kind of like that. So, man, I ran with it. So the second cook-off, I was Lucky Charms. And the next, I don't know, couple hundred, I was Lucky Charms. Nah, maybe not that. Yeah, about. So fast forward to 2018, being there was a pretty big kid on the block called General Mills, I didn't think that was a wise idea to go head to head with that. I really didn't want them mooching off of me, because I figured I would surpass them at some point. So, yeah. Long story short, we ended up abbreviating. That's so Lucky Charms become LC Barbecue.
And there you go. And there
go.
we just figured out the LC mystery. I love it.
Yeah. So I cooked as Lucky Charms up until, and I think it was around March or April of just last year. So if you look at like my KCBS record before that, it's under Lucky Charms or whatever. It was Gadsden, Alabama, when it was the first cook-off, KCBS cook-off, that I cooked as LC Barbecue, and it's been LC Barbecue ever since.
So talk to us about Texas barbecue. And I bring this up because you're the second guest we've had on the show that is from Texas, that grew up cooking in Texas, and Texas barbecue is one of a kind, right? It's, there's a reason they call it the barbecue trail in Texas. And I don't know of any other place that has a barbecue trail. So, but help our listeners understand just a little bit better about, what is Texas barbecue, one, and then secondly, how do you separate in a very, very competitive field in a state like Texas?
That's a good question. It's almost like, Texas against the rest of the world. Texas is huge. I don't know how many cookers we have, how many teams we have here, but I think I heard maybe 70 or 80 at the Roll, as the number I heard, without counting them, out of 500 and something teams. So, man, almost, what is that? 15% or so, 15-20% almost were from Texas. And that's just the ones that went. It feels like thousands of really good teams in Texas, but Texas barbecue is a little different, especially when it comes to competition, because KCBS doesn't have a large presence in Texas. Texas barbecue, when we talk about traditional, and to go that route, beef is king. Brisket's king. It's simpler. Typically, if you go to restaurants and it's Texas barbecue, salt, pepper, good smoke, cooked tender, super moist, and it's simple. Not heavy on the sauce. It's optional. Some people like it, some people don't. Fast forward to Texas competition barbecue, and it's a lot similar to the rest of the nation. It's a one bite wonder. We're still kind of being judged on the same criteria at the end of the day, and you got one shot to impress that judge. So I think a lot of the flavors in competition are similar. In Texas, when I cook KCBS, man, I cook the same thing in Texas that I do in Kansas City for me, but it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it Texas barbecue, right?
Right.
It's a little bit more souped up or for the competition style with the injections, sauce, whatnot. How do I separate myself? And I feel like I grind harder than anybody else. Yeah, I'm out there as much or more than anybody else. And I just work really hard at it, man. I know I'm not going to win every contest, but I do want to skew the odds in my favor to win more than the next guy. That's my approach. Put a lot of heart and detail into it, and roll with the punches. I always say in my classes that, man, it's real easy to win. You can hold trophies up and smile, and man, nobody's bad at that. But before you can learn how to win, you got to learn how to lose, and losing's hard in competition barbecue. It's hard for me. I don't know many people it's not hard for. Some people talk about it, some people don't. But man, I know if I don't have the results I wanted to cook off, and they're not nearly as hard on me as they used to be. Early on, take that first year, I think it was, almost 8 or 9 months in before I cooked a contest that I didn't walk in. And man, I just wanted to go just like get in the closet and shut the door for a week. It was the end of the
Right.
world. So I had to work through all that stuff and make sense in my brain. I do a cook off, I'll analyze my cook. I know what I turned in, whether it was good or not. The results either make sense or they don't. And a lot of times they do. Most of the time they do. So I take that and I just try to learn for it and move forward in my next cook. I always try to take something out of a cook positively, whether I did good or bad, and use that to move forward.
I love it. So you've mentioned a couple different sanctioning bodies, and Texas has more cooks than anybody else. I think Texas also has more sanctioning bodies than any other state that I've seen. So KCBS, I know, is relatively new on the scene in Texas. And again, for our listeners, that's Kansas City Barbecue Society. But you also mentioned another one, IBCA, which I know has been around a while. And most recently, I've seen, in fact, a mutual friend of ours, Bill Purvis, chatted about the CBA. So let's camp out on those if we can just for a second. The IBCA, I know, is a big organization in Texas. What's the difference between IBCA, CBA, and KCBS?
Okay, so I think most listeners are probably familiar with KCBS, right? You turn in 6 pieces, you got chicken, ribs, pork, and brisket. You need at least 6 individual pieces for the judge. Garnish is not required, but you and I both know I don't really know any teams that don't turn in garnish. And
Right.
there have been teams that do and walked and this and that, but probably not a good idea in general. In Texas, all the sanctioning bodies in Texas, which I think I can think of like maybe 5, but we'll go over those. All of them, none of them allow garnish. IBCA, it's a piece of foil flat in the bottom of the box. CBA, a piece of foil flat in the bottom of the box. Lone Star Barbecue Society, a piece of foil laid flat in the bottom. There's also CTBA, Central Texas Barbecue. I might have said that wrong. I think Danny Mikes is maybe the president of that or involved with that. I've never cooked one. They don't have a whole lot of contests per year. I think maybe 20 or 25, I'm not sure. And theirs are a little different because I think they, like in their, I see brisket boxes and I think they cut, you'll see the slices like a normal box, and then there'll be 2 slices down to where there's 3 pieces on the same slice. So there might be 25 little pieces in there or whatever. That's kind of the most different in Texas. But IBCA has been around for 25, 30 years. When I first started cooking, They were the largest sanctioning body in Texas, the predominant one. So I did a lot of IBCA cook-offs. I was the 2020 IBCA Cook of the Year in brisket, Cook of the Year in ribs. And in 21, it was a lot of change and drama, for lack of better words, but fast forward and you have CBA, some that kind of, it just happened, and Fred started CBA with some other folks. And CBA is a little bit more geared toward, it's more similar to KCBS, and the fact that it does have pork. So you have 4 categories: chicken ribs, pork, and brisket. The difference being they still judge with a knife and a fork. You don't pick the pieces up. So CBA's had tremendous growth in the past 2 years. I think they're sanctioning 80 or 90 events this year, and they're less than 2 years old. So the growth has been tremendous. They bring a lot of excitement. They have walk-up music at awards for each individual team, which is way cool.
Yes, it is.
A lot of energy in the crowd. And so, I mean, that's cool. And I mean, I think that's the kind of stuff barbecue needs to grow. Man, you look at everything grows and evolves, and you either grow and evolve or you don't. But when you bring those kind of things to it, it excites people and hopefully, gets new people into the sport. Numbers are down all over the country, 20-30% at cook-off. So it's good to see some positive things going on in those aspects and see where that goes. Lone Star Barbecue Society, LSBS, has been around quite a while. I'm not sure how many years, but I actually did a bunch of those this year too. I live in the hill country of Texas, and they seem to have a lot of cook-offs out here. And they have a lot of state championships too. So kind of helps to get bunks for the jack.
That's exactly right. So it's a lot of different options in the state of Texas. And, I think one of the questions I get a lot of is, well, how do we even start? How do we do this? What do we do? And I think you mentioned it earlier, and that is just sign up for a competition.
Yeah.
And figure out a name later.
Yeah, pretty much, man. I advise that to anybody. Like, what can someone do to improve their cooking game? Go cook.
Right.
Like the worst thing you can do to me is don't cook. You're going to learn something. You're either going to have success or you're going to screw it up royally and then figure out how to not screw it up. Just getting out there and going cooking is a really, really good start. Man, the barbecue world's big. And most all of us are approachable. So if you're on the fence, man, I don't really know, just reach out to these people. Everybody would be willing to help you and kind of just no different than I did. And I didn't even know barbecue competitions exist until I had someone say, hey, yeah, these things exist and I've done some. Here, I'll kind of show you what I know.
That's right.
And it's a huge help. And there's a lot of people out there that would help with that. And of course you got classes, there's tons of classes. But that being said, and I think it's nice to kind of get your feet wet, maybe go do, I don't know how many comps, 6, 10, whatever, get your brain around it. If you don't do any comps and you go take my class, man, I don't know how effective that's going to be. It's a high level class. I'm not really teaching anybody how to start a fire or run a fire. It's expected, right?
Right.
It's how to win at an elite level. To keep you in the sport, man, we're spending $800, $1,000 a weekend. Man, you come home with no prize money, and you do that every week of the month. Man, all of a sudden you're a house note in, $4,000 a month with no return. So my class is designed to help people get return on their money, walk, make money, be more consistent. That's my goal when I do a class. It's a tell-all, and it's always my current go-to. Whatever, if I'm cooking a cook-off that weekend, this is what I would be cooking. So
that's right.
That's the goal for my classes. Take a lot of pride in it, and I want whoever comes to take my class, I enjoy seeing them have success afterwards.
So speaking of class, you've got one coming up in January. What are the details around that we can share with our listeners?
Yeah, for sure. So, and we're almost full on that. I think we got a couple seats left. But we do have a class in January. It's in Bandera, Texas. It's a Saturday and Sunday class. Class will start at 4 p.m. on Saturday and it'll end on normally 4 to like 9 o'clock Saturday, and then Sunday is like 6 to 3 or 4. I run it exactly, it's almost like it's basically a shadow class for my cook-off. You're full access to everything. All I'm doing is the same thing I would do at a cook-off.
Right.
And I think that is the best translation to a student to make it make sense. And I've done them a couple of different ways. I've done it like all in one day, but that's kind of tough because then your brain has to separate, oh, yeah, I really need to do that the day before. So I just start with my normal Friday afternoon routine. I'll go through meat selection, meat trim, making the injections, injecting the meat, getting done with what I normally do on a Friday, and then turn around Saturday and run my normal cook. So, totally transparent and ask all the questions you want.
And what were the dates on that again in January?
January 7th and 8th, off the top of my head, should be as long as that's a Saturday and Sunday. I think that's the dates that weekend.
It is, and I believe the link to sign up for that is at LC Barbecue's website, and we'll include that in the show notes.
Yeah,
for our
appreciate
listeners.
That's correct. It is. There's you can sign up for our class directly off our website. We have several different options. You can do a class deposit to hold your seat and then pay the balance later. Have a spouse option. So they're directly on our website. If you'd like to sign up or reach out to me, people message me all the time. Got questions, let me know.
I love it. So hopefully our listeners are absorbing all of this and realizing that really not just Phil, but everyone that we've had on the show, it's a family, and 99% of folks are very open to help others succeed. Of course, you're going to have that 1% that's not going to help you. I know as a newbie myself, I haven't been turned down yet, and I hear no for a living. So, it's part of the deal, but I have not been, no one's told me no yet. And I do, ask a lot of questions. So one thing I wanted to camp out on though is growth. And I think this is a fascinating topic, at least in my opinion, is you talked about, how across the country, not just Texas, across the country, Southeast, Northeast, out West, you name it, we've seen numbers lower, 20, 30% lower at these competitions, sometimes more. I've had a couple of big time cookers on the show. Brad Leininger is one of them. And we chatted about growth. And I'm curious, just from your perspective, what can we as teams do to bridge that gap that I think exists between the competitors and the patrons?
Yeah. Man, good question. I would start off that by saying, at least to what I think of why the numbers are down from last year, it kind of really seemed to start in COVID, right? So that kind of like started the ball rolling for the decline. You shut down all these cook-offs nearly to 100%. There were a few, and you could find some, but it was really difficult for that 6-month time frame to be able to find cook-offs. I still did 35 cook-offs in 2020, and there was a lot of portion of that time where there just were none to go to. I think that really started this trend, and you follow that up with $5 diesel, $4 gas, or whatever. You go to the grocery store, aside from barbecue and $150, $200 briskets, man, just go buy a box of cereal. It's not $3 anymore. So I think outside of barbecue alone, everyone in America is feeling a pinch. Then to go spend $1,000 on a weekend and make $80, and that's not going to last long for a lot of people. So the cost just being so high right now is definitely not helping it. You look at other sports, we're self-funded, most of the time. Right. There's a few cook-offs that do a really good job of getting sponsor money and added money, but most of the time, man, we're paid off of entry fees, right? So for the sport really to grow, I think it's going to take things like, I like to parallel it to like PBR, professional bull riding. If I think back like 20 years ago, man, PBR isn't what it is today.
Right.
Now they've got fireworks, they go to Las Vegas, they have the finals, and man, there's walk-up music, there's big stage, pyro stuff, and man, it's just, larger than life. And there's a lack of that in the barbecue world. I mean, it's cool, but the barbecue pitmaster stuff that was done 10 years ago ish, or whenever that was exciting, man. That I remember watching that stuff. I remember those people. And there hasn't been a lot of that in 10 years or however long. There's been isolated stuff. Last year the Food Network came out with Barbecue USA, and I think that, as you know,
Right.
it's super exciting, right? And being on TV is a lure to the sport that's going to bring new people into it. Season 2's ago, they're already working on it. They just got through filming me and Carmen and Reed for 2 whole days at the Royal. So, man, it's exciting to know they're bringing that back. And I think that's the kind of energy and that's the kind of things that need to be interjected into our sport to help out with the growth. That, and man, like along the lines of PBR, you look at those bull riders, man, they got Monster on their jackets. They've got, I don't know, Bud Light, you name it. And there's big money going into that, right? That's, those guys win a contest, it's 100 grand every weekend or whatever it is. And that used to not be that way. Bull riding 30 years ago, man, you might make 10 grand. So
Right.
I think those are the kind of things that will make our sport grow to the next level. To, as long as we're self-funded, then we're always going to be what it is.
Right. And I think it's trying to figure out, and this is something I've tried to crack the code on, is figuring out how do you go from self-funded to partially funded to fully funded, right? Like you talked about the PBR. Now I'm not expecting, Monster to be on our t-shirt or anything anytime soon. But, for me, one of the things that I kept hearing, and again, I'm a little over a year into this. I kept hearing, you can't make any money in competition barbecue. And for the most part, I would agree with that, for the most part. However, I'm wired that if I keep hearing you can't do X, and I keep hearing it over and over again, I'm going to really start to question why I can't and try to figure out a way or crack the code. And I think to some degree, you've figured out part of that code, maybe not all of the code, but part of that code in that, that you've got your injections and rubs and classes. And I think that's a way to generate some revenue off of your passion, because to your point, passion is great. I think all of us in competition barbecue are passionate about cooking and serving others and barbecue in general, but passion doesn't pay the bills. So there's, for me, trying to figure out, okay, how do you make this sustainable? Right? Because you gave the example of, well, if you're spending $1,000 a weekend and you're making $80, the math just doesn't work. I mean, it's only a matter of time, right? And so I think it's
unless you're independently wealthy, but then it's just statistics, and most of us aren't. So
that's right. Yeah. And I've seen, obviously I've seen folks go the restaurant route. I've seen folks go the rub and injection route, which is the route you've gone. Looking into the future and, 2023, 2024 and beyond, what else is in store? What can we expect from LC Barbecue?
So for me, I'm going to keep working on the line. I've got, like I said, I think 5 products I'm working on now. I mean, they could all drop in. It's going to take me at least a few months to drop any of them. But they probably won't. They won't be finished that way. So I'm always working on something. The comp world is my playground, for lack of better words, to develop products. Man, you can cook things at home all the time, and man, your family's going to tell you they're so awesome and this and that. But man, until the judges either agree with them or don't disagree with them, that's real data for me. That's the same data you're going to get, right? We've got a couple rubs we're working on. I've got a turkey injection I'm working on. I hope to have it released this year. It's only like 3 years I've been working on it. It's probably not going to happen, but I do expect it to be ready next year for the holidays, and that's kind of aside from competition. However, turkey smoke has grown, so there you have that. Sauces on the agenda at some point. It might be a couple years down the road. So I'm just going to continue to grow the line to meet, Our target market is competitors, competition barbecue, people that want to make their products better and please a judge and win. We all know that there's bleed over into the backyard world, which is where the mass of the numbers are. And most of the time, the backyard guy wants to do what the pros want to do.
Right.
Obviously, if it works in a competition, man, your house is probably going to be pretty happy with it. King of the cul-de-sac, we call it. So
That's right.
so that's kind of where LC Barbecue's plans over, I guess, the next few years is headed, and always subject to change. We're full steam ahead, keep growing. That's the business plan.
I love it. So as we wind down the show, to remind our listeners again, make sure you follow LC Barbecue. They're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, I think as well. I think I saw you guys on, or maybe not yet.
Man, I think so. I think my kids might have set it up and they might have done 3 or 4 different ones. So I don't know how to log into TikTok. And I do run my own Instagram and Facebook account. So I have LC Barbecue Facebook account. I've got Philip Breeden Facebook account, my personal. And then I've got my Instagram account, which I'm not really good at Instagram because it's confusing to me, but I try hard.
There you go.
So
our listeners, definitely check them out.
Limit right there. Anything beyond that's going to be like a hard position of like, you do it.
That's right. And one more time, our website, your website for our listeners, lcbbqshop.com. Last question for you, Phil. What parting words of wisdom do you have for those listening that are loving barbecue and thinking about getting into it? Competition barbecue, that is.
Man, get out there and go do a competition. Man, fall on your face or go win. It doesn't matter. Man, that's the number one thing I suggest for a person. Talk to your friends and just go do one. You'll figure out real quick if it's for you or not. The barbecue family, the world of barbecue, you say 1%. Kurt, I think it's a lot lower than 1%. I don't know how many, and that's a great example. I only say that because, man, I can't, thousands of people I know in the barbecue world. And man, I can count on one hand of those guys I really don't want to talk to again. You know what I mean? It's such a big, and it's incredible that those numbers are that staggering of just a good world of good people and good times. If it weren't for the people in this sport, man, I'd be doing something different. It's the people that make it for me. Seeing those people, if I don't win, I'm watching my buddies win. Man, it's just a good, wholesome environment that you don't even have to be if you don't want to be a barbecue comp guy, man, you probably like to eat barbecue. So,
right,
man, it's just a lot of coolness. Who don't like barbecue? Go do a comp.
I love it. Well, Phil, we appreciate you coming on the show, sir, and look forward to hopefully seeing you on the trail sometime soon.
Hey, appreciate you having me, Kurt.